Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Professor Stephen Hawking, one of the world's most famous and foremost scientists, has launched a stinging attack on the government over the NHS. He's accused the Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, of cherry-picking evidence to justify the creation of a 7-day NHS. Mr. Hunt has rejected that and accused a Nobel Prize-winning scientist of spreading falsehoods. Now, our correspondent Sarah Campbell is at the Royal College of Medicine, where Professor Hawking has been speaking, and I'm sure will tell us what he had to say. Sarah.
Well, indeed, Kate, Professor Hawking acknowledged that he wouldn't be here today were it not for the expert care he'd received at the hands of the NHS, but he is concerned at its future. And he didn't pull any punches, accusing the Health Secretary of abusing science, of cherry-picking studies in order to win the argument over whether levels of care at weekends in hospitals are dangerously low.
Hunt has cherry-picked research. Speaking as a scientist, cherry-picking evidence is unacceptable. When public figures abuse scientific argument, citing some studies but suppressing others, to justify policies that they want to implement for other reasons, it debases scientific culture.
The issue of a 7-day NHS week has proved toxic in relations between the Health Secretary and much of the medical profession in England. It was at the heart of many of the recent strikes which led to cancelled operations. In 2015, Jeremy Hunt stated that 6,000 people die each year because of a Monday to Friday culture in the NHS. He wanted more senior staff on shift at weekends. One study was widely quoted, showing death rates were higher for people admitted at the weekend, 16% for those admitted on a Sunday, compared to 11% for people admitted on a Wednesday. However, the underlying reasons were much disputed. Responding to the cherry-picking accusation, Mr. Hunt tweeted, "Stephen Hawking is a brilliant physicist, but wrong on lack of evidence for the weekend effect."
And the tweets have continued. Professor Hawking also said that he sees the NHS moving towards a US-style health insurance system. And in a tweet, Mr. Hunt said this afternoon it was a pernicious falsehood. And he continued, is it too much to ask Professor Hawking to look at the evidence? Jeremy Hunt has never shied away from taking on the medical profession, and it seems he's not shying away from taking on, arguably, Britain's greatest living scientist. Kate.
Sarah, thank you.
Well, here, the world-renowned scientist Stephen Hawking has publicly criticised the Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt over the Conservatives' policies on the NHS. In a speech at the Royal Society of Medicine, Professor Hawking accused Mr. Hunt of abusing scientific argument by cherry-picking evidence to suit his plan for a 7-day NHS. Well, Jeremy Hunt hit back on Twitter, and Jane Deeth is here with more. Jane.
Yes, Professor Stephen Hawking has lived a long life against all the odds, and he says he owes his life to the NHS. He is a Labour supporter, and he believes that politicians are trying to privatise the NHS, undermining its funding and putting us on a path to an American-style health insurance system. But today, he took aim at the Health Secretary, saying that Jeremy Hunt has a less than scientific approach to policy. This is all to do with the row about what Jeremy Hunt calls the weekend effect. This idea you're more likely to die if you're admitted to hospital, say, on a Saturday or Sunday. 15% more likely to die, according to Jeremy Hunt. And he's used that as part of his argument for 7-day working in the NHS. Now, that is a problem for some medical experts.
So why does Professor Hawking in particular take issue with this claim?
Well, I think he accepts that there is a possibility that perhaps more people die when they're admitted at the weekend because there are fewer planned operations and more emergencies. And he is saying that effectively Professor Jeremy Hunt is filleting the evidence, selecting studies, some of which have not been independently reviewed, which suit his ideological stance, and ignoring papers which don't.
Speaking as a scientist, cherry-picking evidence is unacceptable. When public figures abuse scientific argument, citing some studies but suppressing others, to justify policies that they want to implement for other reasons. It debases scientific culture.
Now, nevertheless, Jeremy Hunt on Twitter was bold enough to question Professor Hawking's grasp of the data, saying he's a brilliant physicist, but he's wrong on the lack of evidence for the weekend effect. And then later he went even further, accusing Professor Hawking of a pernicious falsehood in the idea that the government wants a US-style insurance system. Is it too much to ask him to look at the evidence, he said. The evidence in his mind is that under the Conservatives, the NHS has more money, doctors and nurses than ever before, and actually the proportion of people going private has fallen. There's been quite a lot of amusement on Twitter that Jeremy Hunt is a brave man to debate science with Professor Hawking, but I think it just shows that with the NHS it's always passionate and often political.
Quite. We'll see how this one plays out. Thank you, Jane.